How many of you have ever had a conversation where afterwards you thought, okay, I know how that was supposed to go, but they missed the point entirely? Okay. How many of you have felt like, okay, I'm really just passionate about this idea and I know what I'm trying to say, but the words are not coming out right? Okay. So cool, we've all been there. Me too, just so I can throw in human, the same. This is really, really crucial, and it has to do with the previous section Larken just talked about. I figured out that this aggressive, subconscious, and I call it aggressive because when it comes out intensely, it's a form of the animal aggression, but this aggressive subconscious intensity that comes from us in the form of passion comes from this subconscious assumption that's actually very dangerous. It's dangerous to your health and it puts you under stress. It's an assumption in the back of your mind that, one, you can fix somebody, you can fix the world, and you have to. And if you don't fix them and change their mind and heart right now, the world's not going to be free. Does that sound like it's probably right? That's a little bit of the subconscious thing that's going on. And I felt it in me too. I had to kind of look back at myself and go, where's this coming from? Okay, I want the world to be free, but there is this subconscious feeling like I have got to change their minds now. And the assumption in that is that you can change their mind, that you can reach in and just go, flip a switch, and they'll do it. If you just say the right words, you'll flip a switch, and they'll change their mind. And that's actually dangerous. And this is important because part of wrapping your head around changing your own psychology in this is going to be realizing you aren't the one doing any changing. And you can't. You shouldn't. You can't change any minds. They're changing themselves. They really are. You aren't changing their minds, and you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to try to fix the world all yourself. You can't fix the world all yourself. And it's this subconscious assumption that we can just be this God, this mental surgeon, and go in and if I just adjust the wires, boom, you're fixed. And we know that doesn't really work that way. And we know we shouldn't be able to do that. We shouldn't be God. We shouldn't be some all-powerful rewiring mental surgeon that can go in and flip people's switches in their brain and boom, now you understand what I do. It doesn't work that way. We sort of do know on one level people have to find their way through their own mental maze, right? Okay, so now comes this question. If you can't yourself change somebody, if you can't reach in and flip that switch, and it isn't your job, then how do we change the world? And what is your goal in conversation? If that isn't it, what is your goal so that you can rest in peace and have that confidence and know that you're still having an effect? What is that measure of success that you can look for and go, I did what I needed to do, I did all I can, and I know that something got through. I know that they're going to walk away changed from this conversation, and I can relax and I can be at peace because I reached my success and I reached the goal. What is that? What is the goal? That is the next section of Candles in the Dark. Larken?
Yeah. I asked you earlier, it is, the speakers are just low. I asked you earlier to ponder whenever you're talking to somebody, why are you talking to them? What is your goal? And that time I meant it in a general sense. Are you doing it for your own entertainment, or are you actually talking to them for their benefit, to try to help them out of something? But now we get to the goal, and I'm going to ask it more specifically. Why are you talking to them? What are you hoping to accomplish? What do you expect to have happen? And again, this is something that most people don't bother to even think about. They just, well, I have my beliefs and I'm talking to somebody about them. Like, do I actually need a goal? Subconsciously, I think we may sort of have the goal of, well, I'm going to talk to this person and in 10 minutes they're going to say, never mind everything I thought my whole life. You're right about everything. I give up. You're totally right. I'll believe everything you say. Yay. And if that is our assumed expectation or goal, we're always frustrated and disappointed because you don't ever get that. And then you walk away all, annoyed and like, they just can't get through to anybody, blah, blah, blah. And recently I sent a thing to my Facebook page saying, these days, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much effort do you put into trying to convince other people? And I already knew the response I was going to get. I just wanted to be able to get it so I could quote them. And I got this long list of quotes from people saying, like, it used to be 8 or 10, like I try really hard and it's just so frustrating, it doesn't do any good. I'm just wasting my time, so it's 2 or 0 or whatever now. I just give up. And that is so sad to me, because I know that the reason their results are that low isn't because of the rest of the world is incapable of understanding this. It's just because of the psychological barriers between them and the people they're talking to. They're talking to a wall and the person is hearing a wall and it isn't accomplishing anything. And it gets very exhausting and it gets very frustrating. And part of it is that people don't even know what they should expect or hope to accomplish by talking to somebody. They think, I'm going to talk you into it. I'm going to talk you into agreeing with me. And if I don't, I'm just going to walk away frustrated. Well, then you walk away frustrated every time. And eventually you just stop doing it. Because like, I don't want to be frustrated every time. Why bother to talk to the 100th person who's just going to say, oh, that's crazy and extreme. And so I give up. Never mind. I quit. And I've seen a lot of people say that. And it's, again, I can totally relate. I can totally sympathize. And having been a stubborn anarchist for 23 years, I can totally tell you, I sort of wish I could have given up about 1,000 times. Only my own mental disorder made me stubborn enough to keep going. And luckily along the way, I learned some things about what actually can make people hear it. If your goal is to change their mind right there and right then, you will fail almost every single time. Every once in a blue moon, I'll have a discussion with somebody, and in a very short period of time, they'll admit, hey, yeah, you're right, that makes sense. But that is very rare. If that is what you're measuring your success by, you're going to feel really bad about your efforts almost every time. Here's an important analogy I like to use. When you are talking to them is not when the change is going to happen. The change will happen later when you're not there. Imagine some skateboarder kid who just went skateboarding and broke his leg and he goes into the doctor's office. Doctor, can you heal my bone? As a matter of fact, no, I cannot. We don't know how to do that. But I can put it into a situation where it will heal itself. Because that's all a doctor does with a bone. Sometimes he might use bolts or he just lines it up and puts a cast on it, takes an x-ray, there, it's lined up. Your bone is going to heal itself. I can't do it. People can't do that. But we can put it in a position where it can do it to itself. And it's like, so he does it and the kid's like, okay, did you fix my leg? No, I didn't. I just lined it up. You have to let it fix itself and it's not going to happen in my office. And if you go out and you go skateboarding again and break your leg again, oh well, I did what I could do. And all I can do is line the bone up, check the x-ray and see that, yep, I set up the situation such that you can fix yourself. That is all we can do when we're talking to people who still believe in political authority, is set up the situation so they can fix themselves. And the analogy keeps going. It's going to take time for it to heal. A broken leg doesn't matter how well you set it and how well you put a cast on it. It doesn't magically fix. Because when somebody's been indoctrinated into a belief system over years and years and years and years, even if intellectually you lead them to something that logically proves that all of that is hogwash, they still have to process it. That, the indoctrination still has its roots like deep in their soul and their psyche, and the new understanding has to trickle down through that and all the way soak into their consciousness, and that's not going to happen in front of you. And a lot of times you'll even have a discussion with somebody and they will sound like they're not paying any attention. They'll sound like they're in complete argument mode and completely defensive and whatever. And later you'll hear from them that they actually thought about things and they changed their mind a little bit as a result of the discussion. There's one person in particular that I was, back in AOL chat room days in like 1996 when I became an anarchist. There was somebody I argued with off and on, and it's like, oh, you're going to believe that forever. And back then I knew like one other voluntarist in the whole world. And I argued with somebody, and then it was years later, I like met them on Facebook, and they said, hey, remember me? I was blah, blah, blah. And so that was sort of funny, and they said, yeah, I thought about what you said, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, there was no indication you were thinking about what I said back when we were having these discussions. You thought about it, and years later, it's like, yeah, political authority is bogus, never mind. So you can't measure your success on whether the person there and then says, you're right, I give up. Because that's not when the healing happens. It's not going to happen in front of you the vast majority of the time. So how do you measure whether you did what you could? Our doctor measures it by you put the cast on and you take another x-ray and go, yep, they're lined up perfectly. Don't like go skateboarding out my door. Keep that immobilized and don't play around on it, and it will heal itself over time. But what do we do? Like if they're still going to leave the room disagreeing with us and believing what they believe no matter what we do, how do we know if we did any good? Like, do you have to wait 3 years to figure out whether that discussion was worth having? Because that's kind of frustrating. There is absolutely a way to measure whether you accomplished anything of value, even though most of what you accomplish is not, most of the change is not going to happen while you're there, and you're not going to get to see it happen. You may later talk to the person and realize, oh yeah, I really did have an impact, and I helped them look at something and question something. Just like the doctor shouldn't measure his success and his competence by whether the skateboarder goes skateboarding the next day and breaks his leg again, because the doctor doesn't get to control that, we shouldn't judge our success or whether we did what we were supposed to do by whether the person agrees with us before they walk out of the room or the next day or the next week. The goal, as Amanda alluded to, the goal is to do what you can do and know how to determine that, yes, I did what I should do, I did all I can do, and then let whatever's going to happen, because we don't get to control their brains. We don't get a joystick that just makes them think whatever we want. It doesn't work that way, and it shouldn't work that way. And the desire to control what people think is, it doesn't work, and it's not the way voluntarists should think anyway. Again, to hearken back to the question of, are you doing this for your sake or theirs? Are you trying to free them from somebody else's control, or are you trying to control their brain? I'll make you think what I think, not what the state has taught you to think. And if that's your attitude of, I'm going to make you think what I think you should think, it's not going to work, and it's not very voluntarist of you. But if your goal is actually to free them from somebody else's control, and you understand it's going to take time before that actually manifests, and you start noticing, hey, they're breaking free of that, then there are ways, which we are about to get to know exactly if you did what you should have done and could have done. In the end, they have to choose it. They choose what they believe. You don't choose what they believe. And that's how it should be, and that's how it has to be. So you can't save them. You can't deprogram somebody. You can't unindoctrinate somebody. You can set things up such that they can do it to themselves. Just like a doctor can set the leg so it can heal itself. So what is the actual measure of success if you're talking to somebody? The entire goal, if you're using this method, the entire goal is to get them to see the contradiction in their own belief system. And that's all. Because when they come to the point where they realize, well, I believe this, but I also believe this, and they don't match, they have to do something. It's sort of like, hey, my bones aren't attached right now. Something should probably be done about that. When you can get them to see that, that is all you should be trying for and all you can do. You can't heal it for them. You don't get to decide what they do with that contradiction. You don't get to decide, okay, so stop believing this and believe this and now believe all of this and agree with me. That's not how it works. But you can show them the problem to the point they can't escape, because they've seen it inside themselves. It's not about you had an opinion and they had an opinion and they didn't match. It's they have an opinion and they have a different opinion and they don't match. And as soon as they see that, which is the entire goal, is to get them to see that, they have to figure out what to do about it. And they have to heal that. And you can't. But you can lead them up to that contradiction And what he chooses to do about it, A, is up to him, and B, is not going to happen in front of you anyway, in the vast majority of cases. So, the two most common indications that you did it right look exactly opposite to each other. The first, my favorite, which is usually pretty rare, except if you actually do candles in the dark, it happens pretty frequently, which is you get somebody to the point where they actually say, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. I'm inclined to say this, but also I understand that, and I don't know what I think about that. I've never thought about this before. I'll have to think about that. That is the best response you can get. Notice it isn't a conclusion, it's confusion. It's getting to the point where they're like, I don't know. You got them to see that there is a problem that they have to sort out. Not you, they have to sort it out. And if they say, I don't know, I'll have to think about that, that is the goal. That is the finish line. You did what you were supposed to do, and they openly and calmly told you you did what you were supposed to do by telling you they're uncomfortable with their own belief system and that they need to sort it out. A very common thing I see, which frustrates me so much, is when I see a voluntarist talking to a statist, and the statist gets to the point, okay, I sort of see your point about this, and I'm not sure what to do about that. And the voluntarist in argument mode, it goes, this is the time to pounce. Whoopage! If somebody says, I'll have to think about that, the thing you should do next is shut the hell up. Let them think about it. Don't jump on them. Don't try to push it in one direction. Don't try to solve the contradiction for them. Let them think about it, because them thinking about it is how they change their mind. You thinking about it is not how they change their mind. Them thinking about it. So when they say, I'll have to think about that, let them think about it. Now, if they're asking you for input and they want to keep going and having an exchange, fine, do it. Help them. Be on their side and walk them through it, but don't use that opportunity to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory, as it were, by making it into an argument when you got to the finish line. It's like you got to the finish line and then pulled them back from it just to make an argument out of it. And I've seen that happen so many times. So the ultimate response is when they just come right out and say, I don't know what I think about that. I'm not sure how to answer. My second favorite response looks completely different. And this only applies if you were calm and actually did the candles in the dark method, the whole way. You weren't confrontational, you weren't accusatory, none of that, just by asking them questions. But they get to the point where they become agitated and defensive or aggressive, and they say, this is crazy, I don't have time for this is ridiculous, we'll never, and they run away. Now, to most people, that would seem like 100% failure. They didn't listen, they freaked out, they got emotional, they ran away, they didn't hear it. The reason that is a sign of success is the exact same reason that the first thing is a sign of success. Some people show their cognitive dissonance by saying, I feel cognitive dissonance. I'm not sure what to think about it. Some people show it by going, ah! That response is just as good an indication, because it still tells you they're not comfortable with their own belief system. If you can get them to that just by nice questioning, and you're on their side the whole time and you weren't attacking them, and they flip out, it's because they felt the contradiction. And if they freak out and run out of the room, the joke's kind of on them, because it goes with them. Because it wasn't your beliefs against theirs, it was their beliefs against theirs, and they're both going with them when they leave the room. It's still going to bother them. Running away from you doesn't help, because you aren't the threat to them. Their own confusion and their own contradiction is the threat, which made them uncomfortable. So here's something that's a little bit ironic. Your job when doing the candles in the dark method is to make them uncomfortable while being on their side, because cognitive dissonance is uncomfortable for almost everybody. Seeing a contradiction in what you believe, especially if it's something you've believed for years and years and years, you realize, yeah, I'm totally sure about this and totally sure about this, and they don't match, do they? That's not fun for people. So you have to try to make it not fun for them while being on their side. Like you're not just torturing them for the heck of it, but you need to get them to an uncomfortable place, because it is the discomfort of seeing a contradiction in their own brain that is going to make them look at it and make them decide what to do about it. And that's how I became an anarchist. It's how a gazillion people I've talked to admit, yeah, there was this, ideas were crashing into each other in my head, and I was trying to sort it out and be consistent and rational and actually have moral principles, and it was uncomfortable. I know very few people who actually comfortably went from being a statist to being a voluntarist. It's almost always awkward and unpleasant. I don't even want to admit how many years it was awkward and unpleasant for me to finally give up that last little bit of statism. But that means it's your goal to make it uncomfortable. And again, if some skateboarder comes into the doctor's office and his bones are like this, it's like, wow, you're not going to like this. Ow! Why did you do that to me? Because you needed it. Now I'll put a cast on it, and you can scream at me and go out the door and try not to break your leg and heal yourself. But it takes that discomfort to get them to a point where they have to look at it. Because as long as they're comfortable believing contradictory garbage, why would they bother questioning it? Why would anybody question their paradigms if it feels, comfortable and pleasant to keep believing what they always believe? So you have to make them uncomfortable while being on their side, which is sort of a weird balancing act to have to do. And we're going to get into exactly how you do that. And of course, those aren't the only two indications of cognitive dissonance, the either saying, gee, I'll have to think about that, or flipping out and running away. There's a whole bunch of other examples. And it's easy when you're having a discussion with somebody to think of it as sort of a debate. Like, we're going to say words at each other, and by the end, we'll tally up the score and see who won. It isn't a football game, and you can often get success in 30 seconds, and then again 5 minutes later. And if you know what you're looking for, which is just signs of cognitive dissonance in them, signs that they realize they don't know what they believe. That's the whole goal, is to get them to realize they don't know what they believe and have to sort stuff out. And there's a million little ways that people can show that in their words. They can either come right out and say it, but there's so many little body language things. And when we've done Candles in the Dark events before, we invite in people on the second day and the last session for people to try out what they just learned. And surprise, surprise, they're not argumentative and stressful, and they're just fun back and forth. But you get to see a bunch of examples of here's what happens when somebody isn't sure what they think. And one that happens, I think every time we've done it, one person or another did this. Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree. Sighing and looking at the ceiling is a dead giveaway. They don't know what to say about their own beliefs. If you just ask them a question and they go, or they'll look down. Sometimes they'll smile. Sometimes they'll all the way laugh at the fact that I don't even know. I don't know what I believe. I can't even give my own answer about my own view of reality to a basic question. And there's so many little telltale signs that they got to the point that they're uncomfortable. And that is the goal. That is, you did what you should do. That is the setting the bone and getting the x-ray that said, yep, I did what I should do. And so if you're measuring it by the end of the conversation, they have to say they agree with me. No, you're going to fail almost every time. But if you go, yeah, we had this nice conversation. It was pleasant. And 5 or 6 times I had them going, oh man, I don't really know how to answer that. And I'll have to think about it. That is the best you can do. That is the entire goal. And you may win, like I said, 5 or 6 times or 20 or 1 or whatever in a conversation. You may get them to that point over and over again. It's not counting up the score at the end. It's how many times you can get them to the point where they're not even sure what they think about their own belief system, because their brain is starting to see the contradictions in what they always assumed. If they are uncomfortable, you did your job. Now, if you just do it to be mean, that's not the point. But if they're uncomfortable because of cognitive dissonance, that is all you can do, and that is your measure of success. Whatever happens after that, you set their bone, you check the x-ray, whatever happens after that is not your responsibility, and you should not feel bad about it. You shouldn't feel anxious about, gee, I hope they, think the right thing afterwards. I hope by tomorrow they agree with me. you did 100% of what you could do, which is lead them up to it, put them in a situation where if they want to, they can heal the garbage they were taught. That's all you can do, and it's all you should be trying to do. Otherwise, you'll just be frustrated as hell. And that's a big problem. It was for me for years and years and years, and it is for a whole lot of voluntarists, is the frustration of feeling like, did I make a difference? It didn't feel like I did. And if you don't know what to look for, and you're not constantly recognizing, oh yeah, I totally made them have to pause and reconsider what they're saying, that's all I can do. If you don't have a measure of success, it's very easy to be frustrated almost every time when they don't end up agreeing with you after 10 minutes or an hour. And when you see this method done in action, whether you're doing it yourself or watching somebody else do it, watch carefully for all the signs in the other person that they get to that point where they're not sure what they believe, where they hit the wall of cognitive dissonance and have to hesitate. And people respond, different personalities will respond very differently, but there are so many different telltale signs that show that, yeah, he's not sure what he thinks about this, and he's going to have to process it later. And again, if somebody wants to keep talking and wants to follow up and wants to keep engaging with you, keep talking to them, but don't push them, because that gets them to an uncomfortable point. And if they're to a point where they sort of can't go forward until they sort this out, give them all the time in the world, give them all the space in the world, because getting them there was the whole purpose. It wasn't getting them to decide the right conclusion, because you don't get to do that. It was getting them to a point where they realize, ooh, I got to sort this stuff out because this makes no sense. That is your finish line. Now, if you've been talking to somebody a gazillion times and you're, again, you tend to get in a rut with this person, like how we argue back and forth, the longer the cycle of doing that, the deeper the rut will be and the more effort it will take to get them out of it. And keep in mind when you're talking, like Amanda said, it's not flipping a switch. They have to sort of slowly spiral up out of the patterns of authoritarian thought, and it takes a while. And like the skateboarder, he may go out and break his leg and come back into the doctor. Hey, doc, I broke my leg again. All the doctor can do is the same thing he did last time. Line it up, make sure he did it right, give it the best chance to heal itself, and let him go again. Expect it to take a bunch of tries. And, I can't even count how many people I've talked to have said, I explained this and he understood it and he answered and made sense. And then a week later, he came back like he forgot half of it. Because there is a level of intellectual understanding, and it's sort of like this surface film. And underneath that is the years and years of indoctrination and assumption and the patterns of thinking. And I remember myself, when I intellectually understood, government authority is never legitimate, but I could still feel the residual respect for authority programming I had. It's like training a dog. It's like I feel the instinctive things that were bashed into me that I should defer to police and blah, blah, blah. And it was this weird, awkward in-between that very slowly faded out of I know these are just people, mostly bad people, doing bad things and wearing a uniform. And part of my training still tells me I should be extra nice to them. So you have to keep in mind that you're not just intellectually changing somebody's mind about a math problem. This is how they view the world, how they view themselves and right and wrong and society and what the world should be. It's a huge freaking difference to go from thinking we need those guys up there making the world what it should be to we need those guys to not be up there and us to all be equals. That is a very different way of looking at the world. So even when they understand a few intellectual concepts that should lead them to that, it takes a long time to all the way adjust how you see the world to actually process it. So if they're the skateboarding kid that runs out and breaks their leg and comes back to you, just patiently do it again. And let them process it again, because it's always going to be up to them. Now, on my happy little chart, at the top you see the exit. There are two kinds of exits. Knowing when to bail out of a conversation. There's the temporary one and there's the permanent one. Unfortunately, the world does not have a shortage of statists. So if you're talking to somebody and they won't even be honest about what they think, and they're just argumentatively weird, bring up random, unrelated stuff, and they won't even have a calm discussion, don't bother. Go talk to somebody else. There's not a shortage of people worth talking to. But more often, there is the temporary bailing out that comes if you get them to a point where they hit their cognitive dissonance and they're agitated and uncomfortable. Even if you're being nice and polite, you can sometimes realize this conversation should totally continue, but not right now. Because right now they're so uncomfortable and so emotional that it's not going to be rational and useful. I might as well just, whatever. And often you'll find they'll even come back to you later when they've calmed down and said, okay, I've been thinking about this, but what about this? And then you can continue it. So the temporary bailout, because if you're keeping in mind the fact that they're going to heal when they're not in front of you, and it's going to take time, then it isn't so urgent that, no, I have to totally change your mind right now before I let you leave the room. It's okay, we can have part of it, you can get sort of confused and irritable, and then we can just stop on friendly terms and continue it again later, because the healing is going to take ages anyway. Oh, as for the permanent bailing out on somebody, it's easy to think, and I didn't even think this consciously, but I remember feeling like I need to be able to talk everybody into this. Any person, I need everybody in the world to understand there's no such thing as the divine right of politicians and the right to rule. I need everyone to know this. We don't. If 10% of the world didn't believe in the divine right of politicians and political authority, that is the end of every government everywhere. Because if you have 10% of the population that just says, yeah, we're not going to obey, and if you make us, we're going to resist, there is no empire with the power to force compliance, even if the other 90% is like, oh, well, I don't know, we would go along, we would do what we're told and pay our taxes. Doesn't matter. It's sort of like if you have a slave plantation with 100 slaves and 10 of them really, really, really don't want to be slaves and know that it's wrong and they have the right to do whatever it takes to escape your control, they're going to escape you. And they may very well take the other 90 with them. So don't get caught in the feeling that this person, I just need to be able to talk this person into it. Like, go talk somebody else into it. And I don't even mean talk somebody else into it. I mean, go invite somebody else to talk themselves out of the garbage they were taught. And always remember that if you're not doing it, if you're not perceived as being on their side, pushing harder makes them cling tighter. So if you find that doing this is making somebody cling tight to their stuff, either temporarily or permanently, bail out and go talk to somebody else. Although you will find that if you actually train yourself to stick by these methods, that will happen a lot more rarely than it does when you just sort of randomly have a discussion with people without trying to control your own psychology, which will just make them put up a bigger and bigger wall. Okay, there are some basic disproofs of authority that I've talked about in a million different places in a million different ways. I'm going to assume that most people here and most people who, come to a Candles in the Dark or get the online version are already familiar with this anyway. I'll give a very brief overview just as a reminder or in case anybody doesn't. My book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, goes into it more in depth. Oh, and by the way, you all get one, everybody here, so don't wander away and forget that. Basically, the concept of authority, which is the right to rule, is impossible. It cannot exist. And in using the Candles in the Dark, again, you can try other methods. You can try to convince people of everything under the sun. This method is about removing that one bad idea, which is the notion that somebody can have the right to rule other people. It's not about putting all of your beliefs into somebody. It's not about having them agree with everything you think about vaccinations and healthcare and 9/11 and gun rights and blah, 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 blah. Sit down and I'm going to make you agree with me on 57 items on my list. That should not be the goal. It doesn't work. It is to remove one bad idea which is the belief in authority. And here we have, this image kind of sums up the entire problem. A lot of the world views society as the rabble and then the lawmakers, the authority, and their enforcers. What needs to happen is for the whole world to go from seeing that to seeing we're just people. We're all just people. The uniforms don't mean anything. The labels don't mean anything. Nobody has the right to rule. We're just people. This is the lie that we have to help people get away from. We have to help them escape. That is the one bad idea, the notion that these people have rights that those people don't. And that's all. That's all you have to do. And as it happens, for those of you who like, conspiracy theories and the history of all the nasty things that authoritarian regimes have done to control people's thoughts and their actions and to create division and do warmongering and all that, for all those who like to think and learn about those things, the good news is when you remove this one idea, a lot of people are going to keep going and learn about all those things. The even better news is people don't need to understand what a false flag is to make them not happen anymore. People don't need to understand how the Federal Reserve works to make it not work anymore. People don't need to understand how the political fear-mongering, blah, 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 and all that works to make it not work anymore. This is the thing that actually gave me hope, because I was, back in the early 90s, I was politically active. I was still very libertarian, constitutional leaning, didn't realize there was a massive contradiction in my head still. And I was like hoping for a political solution. I was all excited about the 1994 Republican Revolution and very quickly learned, well, that was utterly pointless. Part of me knew there was not a political solution. And I just thought, well, I have to do something. I have to try something. And that's all I could fathom. It's like, well, this is the system. This is the game. I'm going to try really hard, and then I'm going to lose. Like, part of me knew this isn't, people aren't going to vote freedom. That doesn't work. They don't care. They don't understand. So it was horrendously frustrating for me. And then learning more and more about the tricks they do and the divide and conquer and the propaganda that other regimes had used, and realized they're just doing all the same things here over and over again. And then basically it was like, look at this big, horrible monstrosity of an evil machine. How can humanity ever resist that? We're doomed. And then going, oh, look, it's plugged into the wall. You can just unplug the whole thing. The belief in authority is the plug in the wall. If you pull that, all of the authoritarian garbage goes away. The war machine goes away. The banking system that's built on fraud goes away. All the kinds of extortion and control, all of that goes away because it all depends upon the people believing that those things have the right to rule us. This, basically. And that's when I suddenly got optimistic again, like, holy smokes, I can picture that plug being pulled and the rest of it falling over. People don't have to like, here, read this 1,000-page treatise on Austrian economics so you understand why the currency needs the blah, blah, blah. Like, holy smokes, what's the likelihood of everyone reading that and understanding it? 0. How much do they need to? 0. Because if you pull the plug, the whole monster falls over and you don't have to do anything else. And it's important to keep that in mind, first of all, to understand that, and then to keep it in mind, because if you're up against the feeling that I have to talk 7 billion people into this litany of different things they don't understand about history and politics and propaganda and mind control and indoctrination, it's like, oh, okay, I'll start by explaining the Prussian indoctrination system, and then, oh, I already lost them and they ran away and didn't want to hear what I have to say. Like, it can totally feel insurmountable, which it did for me, and I kept going anyway because I'm just stubborn and stupid. But then I realized, wow, there really is a way to make the whole thing fall over, and that's why this should be the entire focus, is to get people to see that as a picture of a bunch of people and nothing else. There's no magic authority, there's no exemption from morality, there's none of that. Don't complicate the issue. The reason this is especially tricky is because, and I'm going to jump back to this guy. See the 3 little caves in the middle, changing the subject? We're going to get into why the other person's brain is going to try to change the subject a million different times, almost every time you try this method. And the reason is when they feel that cognitive dissonance and they feel uncomfortable with their own belief system, they want the discussion to go anywhere but there. They'd much rather argue about predictions of what would happen, or what about the roads, or what about this. And that is why they say, but what about the roads? It's not actually because they care about the roads. It's not because they want an explanation of the roads. It's because they don't want to think about the thing that makes them uncomfortable. And the thing is, I've seen so many people, myself included, get derailed by having an answer to, well, I can explain about the roads and currency and defense and blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, all that they accomplished was dodging the only principle that matters, because that is what made them uncomfortable. And so many responses you will see from people who still believe in government, it's just a subconscious defense mechanism trying to get away from what's uncomfortable. And if you let them lead you off course, it doesn't matter how good your explanation is about, private protection or blah, 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 whatever the topic is. If you let them drag you away from that topic, you let them escape the one thing that matters. If you're arguing practicalities, if you're arguing predictions, if you're arguing anything other than this, you let their brain distract you. And I've done it a zillion times, and I constantly watch other people get derailed where it starts as a conversation of principles and do you have the right to rule me? Can you give that right to somebody else? Very basic stuff. And then the brain of the person who believes in government gets scared and desperate because they can't answer, well, if we didn't have government, how would we take care of the poor? Blah, blah, blah. Please follow me on this tangent over here, because I don't want to actually look at the principles I believe in, because I don't know what to think about them. So I'll drag you in any direction. And there is no, if you think, well, don't worry, I will follow them and explain that to them. There is no limit to the number of distractions and tangents they will take you on to not look at the principle if you let them take you off of the principle. Which is why you have to train yourself to not follow them when they try to change the subject and change the subject and change the subject and change the subject and change the subject. And that is the main problem of, it's kind of ironic, the more you know about a whole bunch of different things in history and propaganda and this and that and the other thing, the more likely you are to get dragged off course because you have something worthwhile to say about all those things. And I'm not saying don't ever discuss them. I'm saying when you're doing this method, don't let it turn into a discussion of something unrelated to the one point here. And the more you know about all those other things, the more tempting it'll be to, okay, yeah, I have lots to say about privatized roads. They don't care. They didn't ask you, because if you explain that, they'll go, okay, golly gee, heck with government, good. I just need to know about the roads. They did it 100% because psychologically they were uncomfortable and they wanted to get away from it. That's the only reason they said. They could just as well have said, how about the weather today? It was just an evasion, and to follow their evasion lets them get off the hook for their own contradiction. And your whole job is to get them to see their contradiction. Making wild guesses about whether we'd be killing and eating each other without a ruling class is still letting them escape their own contradiction, and then just arguing about wild predictions that neither of you can prove. So don't complicate things. Don't complicate things by giving them a laundry list of things they're supposed to believe. Focus on that one thing. And eventually, as luck would have it, they'll extrapolate the rest. They'll figure out the rest of what they need to know after that one thing is fixed. So that is the very simple goal. But getting there is not very simple if you don't have a grasp on your own psychology and theirs, because they will find so many ways, not because they're trying to, not conscious ways, so many subconscious ways to try to get away from the contradiction that you're trying to make them see. And like I said before, if you watch somebody doing candles in the dark to somebody who actually knows how to do it, you can say, well, that's really simple. And it was, perfectly calm and friendly, and wow, I could do that. Yeah, you can. But the likelihood of falling off onto 100 different tangents, if you haven't trained yourself to stay on the path, is really, really high. So most of this, again, is 99% a list of things to not do, and the 1% of, okay, this is the path you should actually be on. So, all right, and with that, I think it is time to go to lunch, and afterwards we will do the session called The Wedge.
Any Q&A before we wrap it up? Any Q&A?
Yeah, question and answer thing. Oh, microphony time. It's the French pronunciation.
Thank you. So, one thing, you're talking about the whole getting derailed and detracted. If you don't at least attempt, because it seems to me like they're interested in what you have to say, but they're looking for solutions. How are we going to operate in a stateless society? How will the justice system work? How will this and that happen? And if you try to stay on topic, they walk away thinking, oh, I got you. I got him on that. He can't answer that.
The only time I will engage in those discussions is when we've already done the thing of authority and they accept it. If somebody's in the position of, okay, yeah, nobody has the right to rule us and I can't picture how it would work, that's when you have those discussions. If somebody is in the mode of, I'm going to keep believing this contradiction until you can explain to me this and this and this and this, don't bother. Because none of that's going to do any good, because they're actually not bringing it up because they want an explanation. They're bringing it up because they want an escape route. But it's very different when somebody, and I remember being, shifting gears and being to the point where I realized, wow, government can't be legitimate. I accidentally became an anarchist because I kept describing government smaller and smaller. It's like, well, okay, taxation can't be involuntary. That's theft, that's not moral. But we still need government. It should just defend our rights. But, I mean, it can't have a monopoly because I can't say, well, you're not allowed to defend our rights. So, and it can't have a jurisdiction because somebody else can do it. Like if somebody else is defending your rights, that's perfectly acceptable. You're not allowed to beat them up so they can have competition, so they don't have a monopoly or jurisdiction or authority and I whittled down government until it wasn't government anymore. It was just people voluntarily interacting. And I remember getting to that point, and I was at the point then that it was like, but how does everything work? That is the time those discussions can happen. But if they're trying to jump to them as an excuse to not look at the contradictions in their head, which is what most of them are going to be doing, like, tell me how all this is going to work. Because you'll find that if you tell them how all it's going to work, they'll say, okay, well, then what about the roads? Then what about security? Then what about this? There is no list. The thing is, because you don't have the power to predict how everything in the world will work, they have an unending list of things to say, well, but what about? And what they're really saying is, I don't want to look at this, and I'm not going to until you can do an impossible task, which is guarantee for me that nothing bad will ever happen to anybody. Then I'll look at it. And what we have to do is go, well, let's look at it now and just tell me what you actually think about that, regardless of what happens. And you can just say, regardless of what you think would happen if we didn't have this, do you believe this is moral? Do you believe this? Because it's all about their own moral code and their belief system. And until that is straightened out and they get to the point of going, holy smokes, yeah, it doesn't add up. There can't be such a thing as legitimate authority. That's when the rest of the discussions can happen. Before that, it's just a distraction. It's just their brain trying to get out of that. Even when they, you may have a 5-hour-long kind of interesting discussion with them about private roads, but the only reason they went there is to get away from the uncomfortable thing. And the whole purpose is keep them on the uncomfortable thing until they sort out their own brain. So.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. My question, you had mentioned the best time to use this method is when you're in a one-on-one situation. Mm-hmm. Are there one-on-one situations that are particularly opportune to use this method, or are there some one-on-one situations where you should maybe avoid it? For example, if someone's really stressed out or something like that, is that a time to avoid? Yeah, I mean, their mental state has a lot to do with whether they're likely to hear it, and if they're in a rush or something, or if they're stressed or defensive or already argumentative. If somebody's up on a stage saying, we need to vote for blah, 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 they're probably not at all open to having a calm discussion. Also, one of the first rules is
keep it private. Don't do it in front of an audience. Now, that isn't always avoidable. And the funny thing is, every time we do a Candles in the Dark, the first thing we do is violate that rule by bringing in some people for the last session to actually demonstrate it. But when there's somebody else there, that's automatically extra pressure on the person. So it's, the ideal situation is when, somebody actually wants to talk to you and it's quiet enough that it isn't bustle and mayhem. But also when there are other people around, even just one or two, they will usually immediately botch it up because they will make it into an argument either against you or against the other person. And so it's one-on-one, and when they're like calm and able to talk and not like trying to rush out the door.
So with me a lot, I don't spend a whole lot of time with family, but certainly during Thanksgiving and Christmas and holidays like that, there's family time, and my family, almost everyone claims that they don't want to talk about these things, but they always try to get me to start talking about them. And then they're like, oh, listen to you. So in these sorts of opportunities where people are wanting to talk to you, or you think they are, it sounds like maybe you're saying, maybe in a sense, maybe kind of cast the line out and say, well, real high level, like, I don't really think that's okay. If you want to talk, we can talk maybe another time. Are you saying to avoid these audience situations?
If there's an invitation to do it, I would do it anyway, but I would make it into the setting of Candles in the Dark, because instead of like telling a group what I believe, if I'm doing this stuff, I would say, well, can I just ask, pick one of them. If, you want me to talk, can I ask you some questions about what you believe? And make it be, you're an interviewer instead of I'm going to give a lecture to you all and then you'll tell me how wrong I am. Because, and one of the main themes of this is more shrink, less preacher. More bringing it out of them and less throwing ideas at them. And I have done that with little crowds around, and other people usually jump in, and it takes some self-control to go, okay, that's fine. I want to know what they think about something. And I'll do it again with you if you want afterwards. But right now I want to know, and it's easy for other people to distract them and turn it into try to derail. Other people are basically doing everything to derail it, and so it takes more effort. But if they asked, I would just say, okay, well, can I ask you a few things about what you believe and what you advocate? And most people are way more open to that because they want to talk about themselves rather than have you talk at them about your beliefs. So even then, I would at least try it, just knowing it's going to be an extra challenge because other people there are usually just a derailing influence and almost nothing else.
Thank you.
Also, if for anyone who doesn't know, the way that we have disarmed all of the people that come from the outside in to Candles in the Dark on day 2 is we basically say, do you want $50 cash for 15 minutes of answering some questions about what you believe? So they come in here and they're just, they know there's no debate, they know there's no trivia, they don't have to prove anything.
They don't have to win.
The first thing they know is, my friend said if I come in and just answer some questions about what I think, I get $50. Cool. So they're incentivized to.
Of course, out in
Go
the
through
real
it
world,
and
you
enjoy
can't exactly bribe everybody to let you ask them questions. But because there is that initial challenge of somebody needs to want to engage enough to even begin. But if you do it right and you're asking them to say what they think, they're immediately more engaged than if you're just throwing your ideas at them. And like I said, it is more of a challenge when anybody else is watching. It can be done. It's just more of a delicate balancing act. Alrighty, anybody else before we, microphone.
So what about
The roads?
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's exactly what I was going to ask. So what about using some conversational persuasion? For instance, I've tricked a lot of women into smelling my hat. And here's how I do it. I'll pull the hat off and I'll say, tell me this don't stink. And now, I've just commanded them to tell me it don't stink. But they're missing information. They don't know if it stinks or not, so they have to smell it.
It's a slightly bizarre analogy.
So, but it's conversational persuasion. It's actually called neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
So here's another one. You know you could. When you say you know you could, they cannot say no because you're telling them that they know they could see things this way. Or you know you could see that there's no right to rule.
Yeah, and the thing I don't like, I know neurolinguistic programming can be used for slimy reasons, like Bernays and the whole history of all that propaganda and stuff. And it can also sort of be used for sort of noble purposes. To me, it's still, that doesn't get to who they really are underneath. It's more like leading them around by a leash. Like you didn't actually change the dog, you just did a trick to make it think there's a snack over there. And so I tend to not want to use those things, except maybe if you mention as an example to get somebody into a conversation where then they're actually talking about what they actually believe. And so it's bringing it out of them instead of, like, anytime you're trying to manipulate an answer or a response out of somebody, you're not really seeing what they are. You're seeing if you can control them. And ultimately, you still can't control someone to free them, which is why I don't tend to go in the direction of using that stuff unless it's just to start a conversation.
Well, I'm only really, I would only use that to get a hold of their imagination, to get them to admit to me, that they actually do agree that these people lie about the lies that they're lying about when they're lying about the lies that they lie about.
Right.
With their liar hole.
Right.
I would sort of say that like neurolinguistic programming is like any use of words. It's a double-edged sword. So you can either, I've heard people call use of words black magic and white magic. The use of language to help free somebody so that they can reach their own goals is the white version of that. That's the good side of that. The way I've almost always seen NLP used, even by people who mean well, is trying to manipulate somebody for their own selfish ends. And I'm not trying to free somebody so just for myself. I'm trying to free them for them. I want them free. And so if I'm trying to manipulate somebody just so that I feel more comfortable or so that I have another friend in liberty so I feel better and it's all self-motivated, to me that's still black magic. It's manipulation of somebody's brain for my ends. If I understand that they would be better free and they would be better off this way, and I know they have goals they can't reach because of some mental block, I would just want to guide them to their own goals and free them. And what we're trying to do here is actually get people to free themselves. We're using language to help people free themselves, not to manipulate them so that we feel better.
Right.
And so that's why it's important to make that point, because a lot of this can seem like, oh, we might be learning some way to manipulate people. It's not that at all. It's just trying to actually free them from their own mental chains.
Programming is even in the name. Like linguistic programming, that assumes that you
Right.
are acting on controlling another individual.
Yeah, which is why I don't like that approach. Lunchtime.